with Seeds for Generations. Just wanted to give you a quick video about what we do with our tomatoes. I'm getting ready to plant tomatoes here in the garden today. And the first thing I do is I trellis my tomatoes on cow panels or hog panels, which are basically 4x16 rigid wire structures. I use these T-posts to attach them to. I put 3 T-posts and zip tie them on each end and in the middle, top and bottom. It creates a nice trellis for the tomatoes to grow on. For my spacing, I basically space the tomatoes out about 12 to 16 inches, one on each side of the center line. And then I space out the tomato plants from each other in each row about 18 inches. And so in a 16-foot hog panel, that gives me basically 11 plants on each side, or 22 plants for the entire cattle panel. And that ends up being about right for what the tomatoes end up growing out to filling out the trellis area. And then, of course, I plant other companion plants like onions or basil along the base of the tomatoes to take up that other growing area. The way that once I figure out what my spacing is, I actually use this handy little tool, which is called a garden auger. It's basically a long shaft you put into a power drill, which I recommend if you have a beefy power drill with one of these Hickstra handles. You want to use it because it ends up taking up a lot of torque as it's digging. Basically, it's about a 4-inch wide, 3 to 4 inch wide, depending on the model you get, auger screw that is about, I don't know, 8 inches wide. It does a couple of rotations, and then basically what it does is it turns just like a drill. So this is the same kind of thing that they would use like a post hole auger to drill holes for fence posts or something like that. It's basically just a smaller scale, and you can use it in the garden. It's great for planting bulbs, digging holes for other things you're going to transplant. Now this one's fairly small, and I usually am going to need a larger hole than this for my tomatoes. And what I like to do, because our garden soil in this spot we've been at for a few years is still somewhat poor, and we're still amending it and trying to improve it, generally I want to give the tomatoes a really good growing medium to grow in. And so I like to dig a hole and then add composted manure in a mix with soil and some other amendments into the hole. So what I'll do is I'll either drill this in and then kind of move it around and drill out the hole to make it larger. Or what I'm going to do here today is I'm actually going to, I drilled holes to mark the holes, and then we're going to use just shovels to dig out a larger hole, and then we'll add a composted manure, soil, and mineral mix with some other things like lime and some other soil amendments we have mixed together. Add those into the holes we're planting them. Now tomatoes, as you can see here, these ones are actually pretty mature. I got my tomatoes, I got a little ahead of things and started them a little early this year. Tomatoes will root from their stems. So as you can see, they'll have these little bumps that come off the stem that you'll see. Those are basically roots waiting to form. So with tomatoes, there's a couple different methods you can do. You can either dig a really deep hole and plant the tomato deep, which will basically allow all the stem area below the soil to start new roots. And the more roots that it has, the more access to minerals it has, the better the plant will do. The other way that you can do it is you can actually do like a shallow trench and lay the tomatoes in there, and then basically bend them to come up, and then everything that's under the soil will spread roots and grow and have more access to nutrients to help the plant grow. I'm actually going to try both methods in a couple of different beds here today, and I'll show you what those look like. So planting tomatoes, basically you want to get as much of the stem down below the soil as possible so you can get a real good root system growing to support the plant's growth. Our tomatoes are planted. What I've done is put soaker hoses within about 3 to 6 inches of them, and then I've taken my wood chip mulch that's combined with chicken litter from our chickens being in the garden over the winter, and I've raked that back around the plants as mulch to help keep in the moisture and also to feed the plants as the wood chips continue to break down mixed with the high nitrogen chicken manure. And as we've kind of finished off this planting area, you'll notice there's these little depressions around the plants, and the reason we do that, and we actually can trim off the lower branches here off these tomatoes. The reason we do that is so when the water drips down, it'll pool in this area and then descend down into the roots of the plants and help focus the water around the roots, which is where they need it. If you're using soaker hoses, I recommend that you actually cover up the hoses with mulch Reason being is that this wet surface area here, being exposed to ambient air temperature, is going to evaporate some of that moisture away, and so you'll end up wasting water into the air that way. If you cover it up with whatever kind of mulch you have, whether it's wood chip mulch or grass mulch, leaves, whatever, that provides covering and shade over it. And also, in the case of the wood chips in particular, they act like a sponge and they soak up that moisture and hold it, and then they end up releasing it into the soil as the soil moisture declines. They'll actually release it into the surrounding soil. So I use soaker hoses here, 2 per row. These are basically 4-foot planting beds. And these T-posts you see here are going to be what I will mount my cattle panels or cow panels to. They're 4 foot tall by 16 foot long panels that I use as trellis structures. The other thing that I do with my tomatoes along the outside of this soaker hose right here, I'm going to be planting in this bed probably basil, which is a good companion for tomatoes. You can also plant onions, are another good companion for tomatoes. So doing companion planting around tomatoes is a good idea, particularly because I recommend that you trim or prune the lower branches off of your tomatoes once they get established in particular. I wouldn't take them all off now, obviously, but once we get some more height on these tomatoes and more upper leaves, I'll start trimming off and pruning off the lower branches. And I end up pruning off basically all of the leaves off the lower branches for the first couple of feet of my tomato vines. The reason for that being is that the more airflow there is around and under the plants, the less chance that there is of it getting blight, either early blight or late blight, which is particularly devastating. It'll actually kill your plants and you can't recover from it. We've actually dealt with early blight these past 2 years in our garden, but because of the aggressive pruning that I do, it's been able to keep it under control, and I basically prune off the leaves that end up being blight on them. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, add them in the comments of the video or below this post, and look forward to interacting with you on the website and via our video channel. Thanks.